everyone, my name is Mishka and welcome back to my channel. I want to start off by apologizing to you all because I know I haven't been posting recently. I didn't expect my work life to be so busy as an SHO, so I do apologize for not getting back to you guys as soon as I would have liked. Anyway, now that I'm here, we'll be talking about something which I believe a lot of people have been waiting for, which is how to pass your Plab 1 on the first take. So I've mentioned this a few times in my previous videos, but when I took Plab and I started this entire process, I didn't really have anyone to talk to or to ask for advice from. There were lots of blogs giving out advice and those definitely helped me, but I also found that these next tips are actually key to passing the exam. So before we start, what is Plab 1? Plab 1 is a 180-item multiple-choice exam hosted by the GMC, which you will be given 3 hours to answer. This is the first of 2 exams which you will be required to take in order to be registered with the GMC. But before you book your Plab, you do have to make sure that you meet the English language criteria required by the GMC. That can be found on the GMC's website. While preparing for Plab, you should remember that this exam is meant for junior doctors coming into the UK, and it's not meant to test a specialist's knowledge. So the tips I'm about to share with you guys are also tips that I've shared with my friends who plan on taking the Plab. So you know I'm really not being stingy here. So tip number 1 is to understand the Plab. Thinking of exams brings about anxiety in all of us, but it doesn't have to be that way. You have to understand that Plab isn't like your typical medical school exam, which can sometimes feel like they're asking anything and everything under the sun. The Plab 1 questions actually have a very clinical approach to them, and the questions are usually formed this way. Let's say there's a 50-year-old male or female who's come in with a background of, let's say, hypertension or diabetes, presenting with the symptoms such as chest pain, abdominal pain, sweating, etc. Observations are so-and-so. Blood results are so-and-so. Now, the questions you're most likely to be asked after being given all of this information is, number 1, what is the most likely diagnosis? Or number 2, what is your initial management? Or number 3, what is the most appropriate management? So something you should take note of is, what is the difference between initial management and most appropriate management? For example, you might be given a question about a person on a ward who's showing signs and symptoms of pulmonary embolism, tachycardia, hypotension, chest pain, history of operations, things like that. If the question is asking you what is the most appropriate management, your answer should be either treatment dose enoxaparin or thrombolectomy, depending on the case. But if the question asks you what is the most appropriate initial management, your answer would be along the lines of maintaining airway, breathing, or circulation. So this question can also present itself as what is the most appropriate next step? So if the question is asking you what is the most appropriate management, your answer would be pointing you towards how do we treat the patient. But if the question is asking you what is the most appropriate initial management or best next step, you need to think about what you need to do for the patient right now. This would all of course depend on the context of the STEM question. However, it's really helpful moving forward that you look out for these types of questions, as they can have very different answers. If you go through the different questions in the question banks, you'll find that some of them have similar STEM questions, with 1 or 2 details changed or taken out to make a whole different diagnosis. For example, if the STEM is talking about a patient with urinary symptoms, but then they mention that they have rigors, this would then tell you that this isn't a simple cystitis and more likely a pyelonephritis. Sometimes you may feel like the question isn't giving you enough or all of the information, but sometimes that's the whole point. What I like to do when going through the questions is to ask myself, what is this question trying to tell me? Because really, the answer is in the question, and it's up to you to identify the pattern that the question is trying to show you. Tip number 2 is to allocate enough time to study before your exam. When I say this, I don't necessarily mean how many hours you need to study in a day. Rather, I'm talking more on a larger scale. I would suggest booking your exam on a date where you can have at least 2 months to prepare. You can increase this to even 3 months so that you're golden for the exam. This, of course, depends on where you are in life when booking your exam, as well as your study habits and your capabilities. If you're like me, who took time off after graduation to study, 2 months of pure study is a good enough time to prepare. However, if you're planning to take the exam while you're working, you may have to be slightly stricter with your schedule and devote certain days or times of day to purely studying. There are a couple of ways that you can go about your study schedule as well. Some people like to do the questions first and then review the theory after and then come back to the questions again later. Others may prefer reading up on the theory first before answering the questions. I would suggest trying these 2 methods out first and seeing which one you're more comfortable with. I personally started reviewing around 10 weeks before the exam. I would study for around maybe 4 to 6 hours in a day, depending on how much I wanted to achieve on that day. I remember initially starting out with around 100 to 150 questions in a day, reviewing the questions I got wrong, and then doing those questions again later on. Tip number 3 is choose your study material. For this, you have a few choices. If you're the type of person that needs external motivation to get you to study, you can take in-person classes at an academy. But of course, with COVID, nothing is really in-person anymore and everything is online. But at least you would still have lectures and notes like a typical class. I've met people who have taken in-person courses at academies and have passed on their first try, and with great scores if I may add. These, however, can be a bit pricey, ranging anywhere between 200 to 500 pounds. They usually come with their own mock exams, so that you can have a feel of what the exam will be like on the day itself. The other option, if you want to save a little, is using online question banks. There are many choices out there on which type of question bank you want to use, some of them as cheap as £20 per subscription. So the ones that I'm aware of are Plabable, Plabkeys, Past Medicine, Plabverse, just to name a few. So personal opinion alert, what I'm about to say is my own personal opinion, and it comes from my own experience with these review materials when I studied for Plab. I don't mean to offend any company or promote any one over the other. When I reviewed for Plab, I initially started off with a certain question bank, which I won't name, but I later found Plabable. In my own honest opinion, I believe that my use of Plabable is what got me through the exam. I just found that the questions and the rationalizations were much better arranged, with links to articles and nice guidelines so that you can double check their answers against the current guidance. You should note, however, that nice guidelines isn't available outside of the UK and you have to be inside the UK to access these guidelines. It costs around 20 to 25 pounds, and you can choose between a 3-month or a 5-month subscription. Personally, I feel that Plabable's question bank is worth the price. I do recommend Plabable to my friends who want to review for Plab 1, as it's cheap and I feel like it provides the best quality of Q&A for the price. I also usually suggest to them to at least take it twice, so that they're absolutely golden for the exam. But honestly, if you're able to even just do one round but really internalize the concepts, then you should be fine for the exam. My own sister used Plabable for Plab 1, but she also took some of their free and paid webinars. But she did get a sparkling score at the end of it. I also want to say that Plabable is not paying me for any advertising before you ask, and that I have no affiliation with any of the companies that I've named in this video. Now, if you decide to go through question banks, make sure you read the explanations and notes after each question, because this is really what will help you avoid making the same mistakes with certain questions and to fully understand the concept. That way, even if the question is shifted around or words are changed, you can still answer the question having read the topic well. So like I said, personally, I used question banks for the entirety of my review, and I would just read the rationalizations and notes after each question. And that really helps because even if the question is jumbled up in the actual exam or it doesn't look like how the question was in the question bank, you can still answer the question properly. So the next bit I'm going to talk about are just optional tips. Now, you don't necessarily have to follow these next few tips in order to pass Plab 1, but they're just some things that you might want to consider doing to give yourself a better chance in passing. So my first optional tip is tip number 4, and that's to form a study group. Now, like I said, this one is absolutely optional because this depends on how you prefer to study. If studying in a group can boost your confidence and motivate you to study, then I definitely recommend it. You can look up groups on Facebook, WhatsApp, or Telegram where you can find study partners or study groups. However, I would personally be wary of certain groups that send random Q&As in the chats, as these questions and answers aren't really regulated by anyone, so you can never be 100% sure of the answer that they're giving you. Also, it's good to be wary of notes and papers that are circulating under academies' names. Some people claim that the information on these papers are intentionally incorrect, and this is done to avoid people not paying for these papers from using them, and that the information is actually corrected during the in-person courses. It may feel sneaky, but it's really just their way of keeping their information regulated, which is fair enough. So my next optional tip is tip number 5, and that's the Oxford Handbook of Clinical Medicine. I personally didn't read the OHCM to prepare for my Plab, but if you feel that you need to read something on the side while reviewing the question banks, then OHCM is a good source of information. I know doctors working in wards who still refer to OHCM for certain clinical pictures. It's a great book that will give summaries on initial management and diagnosis, which is something that Plab 1 frequently asks for. Reading the book may be best for when you're practicing, and maybe too information heavy for when you're just reviewing for the Plab. I personally wouldn't recommend it unless there's a specific topic that you wanted to read up on. So my next optional tip is tip number 6, and that's attending webinars. So depending on how much budget you have left, you might want to consider taking taking webinars regarding certain Plab 1 topics. If you're subscribing to Plab question banks, they may email you from time to time regarding upcoming webinars, and they can even offer you discounts if you're already subscribed to their question bank. Some of these might even be free depending on who hosts them. I know that Plabable has an Instagram account where they post both paid and free webinars that you can attend, and I did mention earlier that my sister did take some of these webinars and she did say that they were very helpful for the exam. So just to summarize everything, I want you guys to remember that Plab isn't meant to be difficult or specialized. The knowledge that they want to test you on is that of an incoming junior doctor and not that of a specialist. You should also remember that the answer is in the question, and every piece of information, or the lack thereof, is a clue. Okay guys, so that's the end of this video. I hope that these tips will help you when you prepare for Plab 1. Remember to not be too hard on yourself when reviewing for the exam, and that the best way to come into the exam is with a clear, positive, well-rested mind. So remember to always take breaks. So thank you guys for watching today's video. If you want to hear more study tips from me, please do subscribe to my channel. If you have any other questions, please do leave a comment or try to contact me on my social media handle, which will be posted at the end of this video. You can like this video as well because we love to be liked. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Best of luck on your review and see you on my next one. Bye!